So if you've hung out with me on my live streams, you've probably heard me tell stories of some of my most formative video games that I ever played. And for me, one of the best ones was Dead Rising. I played it years after it released in 2006 with some buddies of mine that I met on like the first day of high school, and we would go and stay up till like 4 in the morning at one of their houses and we would just play it all night. It was awesome. So Dead Rising has a very, very special place in my heart. It's like a game that I just see and I'm filled with nostalgia, and I look at it through those rose-tinted glasses. I just love it. I just frankly do. So to hear that they were working on a deluxe remaster for the game was intriguing. And when they started dropping some actual footage of what this would look like, I got even more intrigued. It really seemed as though they were making significant graphical improvements. There was also news of other improvements, such as adding the ability to walk while still aiming, which I know sounds like the barest of bare minimums, but again, the original game was from 2006. So back then, all of the controls were super clunky. It just was part of the game, and you were wrestling with the controller to get anything done. But to hear that they were making quality of life improvements in the game with this deluxe remaster was again pretty promising. So when Capcom reached out and offered me the chance to play the game early, I was pretty excited. Now I have a good amount of footage to show you, but I'm not allowed to discuss the whole game. I'm not allowed to show you past a certain point. And so we're going to keep things strictly within those bounds that they have requested. What I will say is that I think broadly this is a true to the source material remaster. It's not quite a remake. They don't do anything crazy like connecting all of the different zones of the mall together so it's just one big seamless thing. But the things that they have added, such as the improved control schemes and then graphical enhancements and stuff, are a welcome addition and do get me into the game once more. And while I initially intended to play this just for like an hour or two for the sake of making a video with my impressions on it, I've ended up falling in love with it again, and I can't stop playing it over and over and over again. So I am eating it up and really, really enjoying it. There are a few things I don't like that I just don't know why they made the changes that I'll get to in a second. But all of this to say, I think that they've done a really good job, and I think there's a lot more good here than there is bad. There's a couple of things I don't like, but they're pretty minimal in terms of my level of enjoyment of the game, and so I'm going to try and explain all of this to you in this video. As always, if you enjoyed the video, hit the like button, subscribe for more, and if you're feeling generous, consider contributing to the fundraiser on this video. I like to raise money for the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. It's just a cause that's near and dear to my heart as a father who has 2 little ones myself, so I would appreciate if you would consider donating through there. We can raise some money and do some good while also talking about a zombie video game. Sound good? Sweet. Let's get into it. Right from the outset, the first thing that needs to be pointed out is that the voice acting cast has pretty much entirely been redone. As far as I'm aware, there is not a single performance that is retained from the original game. Everybody has been recast with new voice actors and actresses. I've seen some people get really upset about this, specifically that they've recast Frank once again after also recasting him for Dead Rising 4. Frankly, I just don't think it's that big of a deal. The performances are, honestly, they're close enough. I know some people really, really love the original performance of Frank West, but for me, it's just like, that's not why I'm playing these games. I'm not playing these games for the voice acting. I'm playing it for the gameplay and the systems that they have with exploring the mall and the psychopaths and everything. So it's just not that big of a deal to me personally. Of course, I would like them to bring back the original actors. I think that would be super cool, but they just didn't. And whether that's a deal breaker for you is up to you, but for me, it's just not that big of a deal. The other thing I noticed was just how much PP, or experience points effectively in this game, taking pictures awarded you during the introductory sequence of you taking photos of all of the infected zombies attacking people on the streets. And this is the first thing that I think a lot of people who are veterans of Dead Rising will notice about the game, which is that they hand out so much XP while you're playing the early hours of the game. It's frankly ridiculous. I'm sorry, I said frankly once. No, I can't stop. It's just, I can't help it. I'm sorry. I don't know what to do. Seriously though, you will level up so freakishly quickly, it honestly makes the game a bit trivial. Maybe it's just because I played this game a ton when I was young and really, really bad at video games, but it feels like this game is an absolute walk in the park compared to the original version. Maybe that's just how they've balanced the preview build, maybe it gets much tougher later on, I'm not really sure. And for all I know, they're going to totally crank the difficulty and the way they balance the XP payouts once we get closer to launch, because this game is expected in mid-September, so we have plenty of time for them to make adjustments. But overall, it stood out to me just how much they were willing to give out as you played through the game. In addition, the game has generally received a major graphical overhaul, but it's retained the feeling of the original game, and everything from cutscenes to individual animations seem to be largely retained. And that's another reason why it's important to note that this is a remaster, not a remake. They haven't redone tons of cutscenes, they haven't rewritten any real entire cutscenes, but they have rewritten dialogue within some cutscenes. Again, I'll get to that in just a second. But on the whole, this is Dead Rising just with a brand new coat of paint, and it's a pretty coat of paint. They also have a ton of different skins for you to apply to Frank as you play through the game. Some of these can be found within shops, as you would expect from the original game, or they can be downloaded through DLC that I'm sure they're going to sell you when the game eventually launches. Some people have gotten upset that this new version of Frank also looks way older than the original version, and I do think that that's fair. They definitely have aged him up, but it's always tough to look at a game from 2006 and then a remaster / remake of that game from 2024 and make one-to-one comparisons. There were so few details in the original model for Frank that honestly, it's tough to gauge exactly how old he's supposed to be. So seeing an upgraded version of his model now is a little jarring, sure, but to me, it's not that consequential of a change. It just frankly isn't that big of a deal to me. I said frankly again, god damn it, I can't stop. And this is the thing, like I've heard a lot of people get upset about every little bitty thing with regards to this game and many, many other games. And just for me, honestly, the offenses within something like Dead Rising Deluxe Remaster are so minimal, it's just not enough to really change my interest in the package. I'm looking at this as a core fan of Dead Rising from back in the day, and it gets me excited to see all of the improvements that they've made. And while there are a couple of things I don't like, it's like this much in terms of actual impact on my consideration of the entire game. There are other things they do here that are much bigger deals for me that I just frankly think are ridiculous, that I'll get to again in just a second. But stuff like this, Frank having a bigger widow's peak is just not that big of a deal. As I mentioned earlier, the addition of being able to aim your guns while also walking and moving is a fantastic addition. They've streamlined the ability to dodge. Breaking free of zombies when they grab you has also been streamlined, and across the board, the game just feels better to play. They do have two control schemes, so if you want to play it with the original layout, you can do that, or if you want to play it with the modernized version of the button layout, you can do that as well. I heavily recommend you check out the modernized version because it plays so much better, it's ridiculous, but there are some side effects. The encounters with the psychopaths were originally balanced based off of that 2006 control scheme, and as a result, with the modernized control scheme where it's much easier to aim and shoot behind cover, a lot of these psychopath fights are just frankly trivial. Like they're nothing. You won't even get hit once. You'll just waltz right up, unload a couple of clips into a target, and you win. It's ridiculous. Back in 2006, where you had to like carefully align yourself and then aim your gun very carefully and weirdly and try to hit them, it was tough. Those psychopath fights could take you 10, 20 minutes just because you had to wait for the perfect opportune moment to peek out and try to take a couple of shots that did a pixel of damage. But this time around, with how streamlined all of the control schemes are, the psychopath fights haven't really been balanced out to account for that. And as a result, it's just way too easy. That is something I hope that they can balance as we get closer to the game's final launch, because these psychopath battles were some of the most fun you could have in the original Dead Rising game, and this time around, they're just too easy, at least in my opinion. Now, there are a couple of things I don't like, and honestly, there might be more hidden in this that I just haven't noticed or that I didn't notice when I was playing, but there are numerous strange cuts and alterations to the game, I think to make this more, for lack of a better term, like PC. So notably, there was an article that went up a few days ago about them cutting the erotica points when you would take pictures of women wearing let's just say, more revealing outfits. You can see right here, Dead Rising Deluxe Remaster removes the erotical genre from the photography minigame, basically just meaning you can't take pictures of those women or of pictures of women and get extra points for it just because they happen to be more revealing. Again, is it that big of a deal? No, the game is still really fun and good, and honestly, if they didn't make this article and talk about this, a lot of people probably wouldn't even notice or remember that that was in the game, but it still is like kind of sucky to do because it's part of 2006. Video games were crazy back then, you know? And so to just kind of cut it out of the history of Dead Rising is unfortunate as far as I'm concerned. But a Capcom spokesperson actually just like an hour or two ago, before I'm filming this video, posted this and explained the choice. They said, quote, "When developing Dead Rising Deluxe Remaster, we tried our best to create a game that would please returning core fans and appeal to new players alike. As development progressed, we inevitably discovered that we couldn't include everything from the original game. In the case of the erotica point system, this was something we discussed at length and decided to remove, not so much as a response to a changing cultural climate, but because we felt there is no need to have a rewards point system on this basis. Additionally, when considering Frank's situation, it is not an appropriate reward for survival and not a skill required of journalists to trying to stay alive for the next 72 hours during a zombie apocalypse. However, players will still have the right to choose their picture subjects freely, and even though they won't receive points, it's up to them to decide what photos they will take to represent their journey." And I mean, I would argue that this is precisely why it was so ridiculous that there were erotica points, but like all of Dead Rising in terms of tone is going directly against the very concept. Like if you want to go into the mall, the Willamette Mall, and you want to just go and just screw around and put on kids' clothes and grab like whatever ridiculous weapon and just go chop up zombies, you can do that. Like you don't have to take your 72-hour survival situation that seriously. And that sort of irreverent attitude is part of what made Dead Rising so fun and so outrageous. If you wanted to take it more seriously, you could, and it's going to be campy, a good AA horror action thriller type of experience. But if you wanted to just screw around and be ridiculous and silly, you could also do that. Put on the Lego minifigure head and just go crazy. It's basically iconic at this point. So do I think it's a big deal that they cut the erotica points from the photos that you can take? No, like, again, it doesn't really change the fact that I want to play this. It's just kind of like lame to rewrite the history of Dead Rising and cut that out of a 2006 remaster. If it was a remake, okay, like we're changing a lot of stuff, but it's just a remaster, so it seems lame to cut stuff like that. Now, another example of something that they've changed to make it more appealing to modern audiences that's just kind of frustrating has to do with another one of the psychopaths. This is one that I noticed. I imagine that there's going to be a lot of others that other YouTubers and like streamers and people who have played this will notice either when the game comes out or maybe on the day that this video goes up when people post their previews. Other people have noticed other stuff, but this one stood out to me. I don't unfortunately have footage of this that I can show you because my footage of this is corrupted, but this is the original footage from the 2006 version of the game, and it's a psychopath called Cliff. And in it, he's basically a veteran from the Vietnam War, and he has all sorts of dialogue about the Viet Cong, and he thinks that Frank is a filthy communist and all this stuff, and he throws out all of that. And in this new version of the game, that like it's just not there. It's just cut. He calls you like filthy or like a mongrel or something. Again, I wish I had the footage to show you, but he doesn't call him a communist anymore. And it was a very recognizable moment in the original game, and it's just not there in the new version. They've just cut it out because I guess they thought a Vietnam vet calling somebody a communist in the middle of a mental health crisis was unrealistic or something. I just don't know why they would cut it out. It's just cringe. Again, is it enough to make me not want to play the game? Like, not really. It's not that big of a deal. It's a few words changed in a cutscene, but it does make me wonder, like, okay, well, if this is a remaster, you're supposed to just remaster the original thing and make it look and run better. But to go back in and then like censor out all this stuff that you feel like is just inappropriate for 2024, I'm kind of like, well, what are we doing? It frustrates me as somebody that really loves the original game And, you know, even though it had some stuff that was very much like a 2006 artifact of its time, I don't think we should shy away from that history in the games industry. Yeah, it's ridiculous that in a zombie post-apocalyptic game, you're able to take photos and get erotica points. That's ridiculous. That's outrageous. And that's part of Dead Rising at its core. And to just cut it out and make it much more placid and tame is frustrating to me. But one thing that's not frustrating anymore are the NPCs when you're trying to save them. This has been perhaps the most exciting change that they've made, and that has to do with the AI for all of these NPCs when you're trying to save them. In the original version of the game, these survivors had basically no brains at all. They would wander straight into combat, they would get swarmed by zombies, they wouldn't do anything to help you, and you had to handhold them to get them to safety, sometimes literally doing that. But I'm happy to report that in this new version of the game, they've greatly improved it. Not only are they just much more intelligent, not wandering straight into big crowds, they'll actually sprint through gaps within the crowd of zombies, getting around them. They'll chase you very, very quickly. And in general, they just behave much more intelligently. You can give them weapons, and then they actually will use the weapons to defend you if their affinity score is higher, which is also a really cool concept. Basically, just the idea that each survivor you're going to kind of build a small-ish relationship with in that moment when you're saving them. And then their behavior will alter depending on what you give them or how you treat them. Some of them might specifically request like a handgun or a machete or a 2x4 or something. And if you get that to them, they will actually use it much more efficiently to defend you and the other survivors, which is an awesome thing. It's a great addition. And it's one of those additions that, again, makes the game feel just so much better in practice. It feels like it's actually working the way that it's supposed to. Now, to be fair, it also makes the game significantly easier than the 2006 version, where sometimes you literally had to give somebody a piggyback ride just to get them through a door because they were so incompetent at walking through a hallway. That was the only way it could be done. Now, they are much more intelligent and you don't really need to bother with that much stuff. And as a result, again, it makes the game a good bit easier than the original one was. It's not bad or anything, it's just not the struggle bus that I remember it being. But again, it could just be that my previous experience with Dead Rising was when I was younger, and so now that I'm older and more weathered, it seems easier in comparison. But I mean, this video is meant for me to just tell you my impressions of the game, so that's what I'm doing. It felt way easier, so that's what I'm here reporting. As for performance, the game runs pretty well. It looks pretty dang good if you ask me. And the only technical problems I would run into was when there were a ton of zombies on screen. There's a moment later in the game when you're in an underground tunneled area driving a car, and I'm not allowed to show clips of this footage as far as I understand the guidelines they gave us, but I will say that there were multiple frame drops when I got down to that area, even on my supercomputer I play these games on. And then also in Leisure Park, which is the big central courtyard area where there's a ton of infected and where the prisoners drive around on that Jeep that has the machine gun on it. That area also had excessive pop-in, especially with zombies whenever I went there. Even with maxed out settings, there was a ton of pop in here. But those were the only two areas I ever ran into anything, and there weren't any game-breaking issues or crashes or things that made the game unplayable. All told, it ran really well, especially for a preview build of the game that, as far as I'm aware, is like months old. By the time we actually get the game, I'm fully confident that this is going to be polished up, and I am here for it. So all told, I've really enjoyed my time playing Dead Rising again. I think the deluxe remaster definitely adds a ton to the overall package, and many of the quality of life improvements, such as being able to walk while aiming. It's honestly amazing that we were able to play the game prior to these quality of life improvements. After feeling how good this is compared to the original control scheme, I honestly don't know how I could ever go back to the old control scheme playing the original version. The graphical improvements are awesome, and while I'm not necessarily in love with some of the character redesigns or with the voice acting recastings and stuff, I don't think it's that big of a deal, and I think that the game is going to be great even with those recasted roles. Some of the cuts they've made to make the game more acceptable to modern audiences, I just find to be frustrating as a fan of the original 2006 game. Again, they're not big enough offenses for me to be like, boycott the game or anything. It's just kind of a bummer to see them cut out some of those more quirky aspects to the original game. But, you know, all I can do is report it to you, and if that's a big deal to you, then you can take that information and do what you will with it. But for me, it's just kind of disappointing, though not enough for me to do anything significant about it. You know, it's just like, oh, that sucks. Anyway, more than anything, I hope that the Dead Rising Deluxe Remaster lights a fire underneath Capcom to greenlight a Dead Rising 5 or a reboot of the series. I love Dead Rising, and to see how they treated it towards the end of its last run with Dead Rising 3 and 4 was just really disappointing and frustrating to see. It seems like they lost sight of everything that made Dead Rising special, and I think with proper direction and with a clear vision of retaining what was good about the original games and being unapologetic in that difficulty and in some of its systems, such as the real in-game timer, that could do so much to give this series another chance at the limelight. And they found some cool and novel ways to modernize the way that players interacted with the real-time aspect of Dead Rising, such as allowing you to speed through time and basically allowing you to go to save points and advance time quickly, which is something that is like a no-brainer. Why that wasn't in the game to begin with, I don't know, but now it's here, it's awesome. And other little quality of life improvements like the ability to pause during cutscenes are also a welcome addition. I actually remember back in the day when we were playing this game like on the couch at my buddy Caleb's house. We were over there with my other buddy Braden, and we're eating nothing but goldfish and chocolate milk, which is basically like, if you think Arby's is bad for you and Taco Bell is bad, that's basically like loading up a mortar in your stomach. It's a terrible idea. I don't recommend it. I mean, it's great when you're drinking the chocolate milk and eating the goldfish, but God forbid anybody is present when the crap literally hits the fan. And I remember my stomach was turning as I'm playing, and we were sitting through one of those long cutscenes with Carlito just rambling about something, and I was like losing my mind and needed to go, but I had to wait for the cutscene to end, and then finally ended, and I sprinted to the bathroom. And that is now not a problem because you can pause the cutscenes, which is my story for you today, that you can avoid having a moment of incontinence now that they've added that. So that's got to be worth the purchase price right there, right? But anyway, let me know what you think of Dead Rising Deluxe Remaster in the comment section below. Are you going to be checking this out? Let me know. I'm interested in hearing your thoughts. Honestly, I can't wait to play the full version and talk about it more when it launches in mid-September. I believe September 19th is the expected release date. And I also just looked it up. Physical copies for Xbox Series X and PS5 are also releasing later in the year on November 8th. So if you're wanting a physical copy of the game, you can also get it then. But with all that said, thank you for watching. Again, thank you for considering donating to our fundraiser right there. That means the world to me, so thank you. And as always, if you enjoyed the video, like it, subscribe, and head over to my second channel where I talk about a lot of video game stuff and some random stuff as well. It's a really good time. All those links will be popping up on screen right about now, and also will be linked in the video description box below if you're interested. Thanks for watching. I love you all. I'll see you in the next one. Hugs and kisses. Bye-bye.